where the secrets of the heart are written with ink and sealed with scandal. Welcome to channel, The Countess Chronicles.
What if the biggest mistake of your life was actually the only real choice you ever made? Here's something nobody wants to admit. We spend our entire lives playing it safe, being appropriate, following the rules, and we call that living. But it's not living. It's surviving. It's existing in black and white while convincing ourselves that color doesn't exist because we're too terrified to reach for it. And then one night, one reckless, drunk, completely inappropriate moment shatters everything you thought you knew about yourself. And suddenly, you're faced with a secret you can never bury. You've been half asleep your entire life, and you just woke up in someone else's story. I'm about to tell you something controversial, something that goes against every piece of advice you've ever received about being practical and realistic. The truth is, the safe choices we make to protect ourselves are actually the most dangerous ones we'll ever make. Because they don't just protect us from pain, they protect us from living. Every time you chose the right person over the one who made your heart race, every time you stayed in the comfortable job instead of chasing the dream, every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, you weren't being mature. You were disappearing. And the real tragedy? Most people never wake up from that vanishing. They reach the end of their lives having never tasted what it means to be fully, recklessly, terrifyingly alive. But here's where it gets interesting, where the mystery of human nature reveals itself. What happens when you accidentally stumble into a moment of pure authenticity? Messy, inappropriate, breaking every code you've lived by, and it changes everything? What happens when one forbidden kiss with the wrong person in the wrong world becomes the only real thing you've ever experienced? Do you run back to safety? Or do you chase the feeling even though it might destroy you? Most people will tell you to run, to be reasonable, to protect yourself. And that's exactly why most people live lives of quiet desperation, wondering what could have been. The conflict isn't between right and wrong. It's between safe and alive. Here's what I'm going to share with you in this story, and I need you to really hear this because it might save you years of regret. There's a moment in everyone's life where they have to choose between the person everyone expects them to be and the person they actually are. Most people choose the expectation. They bury the revelation of who they really are so deep that they forget it exists. But some people, the ones who actually live, they choose the truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it makes no sense, even when it means walking away from everything they know. And yes, it's terrifying. Yes, there are consequences. But the alternative, spending your entire existence wondering, what if? That's not safety. That's a prison with comfortable furniture. I was 28 years old when I kissed Duke William Blackwood in a world I didn't belong to, in a body that wasn't mine, making a choice I couldn't undo. One drunk moment that rewrote my entire understanding of what living actually means. And when I tried to forget it, when I ran back to my safe, predictable life thinking I could unsee what I'd seen, he came back. Demanding what I couldn't give. Demanding that I choose myself, choose passion, choose the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be someone's first choice instead of their safe option. The enigma wasn't whether he was worth it. It was whether I believed I was worth it. And that question, that fundamental question of self-worth, is what this entire story is about. So if you're someone who's ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been the nice one who everyone likes but nobody chooses, if you've ever wondered why playing by all the rules left you feeling empty, this story is for you. Because I'm about to show you what happens when you stop running from yourself when you stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the whole feast, when you finally understand that some kisses don't just change relationships, they change your entire understanding of who you are and what you deserve. The hidden truth nobody tells you: the life you're afraid to choose is probably the one you're meant to live. And it all starts with one forbidden moment that you can't take back, and wouldn't even if you could. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just about a duke and a kiss and a choice between worlds. It's about the silence we all live in when we're too afraid to speak our truth, the codes we follow that slowly kill our souls, and the one moment that changes everything, if you're brave enough to let it. This is the story of how I stopped being everyone's second choice and became my own first choice. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why forgetting was never really an option. Some things, once tasted, become essential. The question is, are you ready to taste it too? You know that feeling when you send a text to the wrong person? That split second where your stomach drops and you'd give anything to unsend it? Well, multiply that by 1,000. I was literally in the wrong story, in the wrong body, having made the wrong choice. There I was, inhabiting Charlotte Ashford's body, a minor noblewoman who was supposed to fade into the background of this historical romance. But instead of playing it safe, I'd somehow ended up in Duke William Blackwood's private chambers at midnight, drunk on wine, witnessing him at his most vulnerable. The mystery of how I got there didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the trace I'd left behind, a kiss that shouldn't have happened, a secret moment that rewrote everything. See? Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about fictional worlds. In the original book, Charlotte Ashford never even touches Duke William Blackwood. She's just a secondary character, a footnote, someone who exists to make the main couple look better. The Duke was supposed to fall for Lady Elizabeth Montgomery, the perfect protagonist with her kind heart and strategic mind. But me, drunk and apparently lacking any sense of self-preservation, I decided it was a brilliant idea to kiss him. Not just any guy, the emotionally unavailable, traumatized Duke, who everyone wanted but nobody could reach. It's like I'd stumbled into a conspiracy against my own survival, breaking every rule hidden in the codes of this world. The conflict brewing inside me was real, and William's confused expression the next morning only made it worse. It was as if every time I'd stayed silent in my real life was taking revenge on me now. All those moments I bit my tongue, swallowed my words, played it safe. They'd been building up like pressure in a bottle, and apparently I'd chosen the worst possible moment to finally speak. Or rather, kiss. I could still see William sitting by the window that night, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, the moonlight catching his tears. The mighty Duke, reduced to raw humanity. And drunk me? She'd walked right up to him, wiped those tears, and kissed him like it was the most natural thing in the world. The hidden truth was that I'd always wanted to be reckless, and now I'd gotten my wish in the most complicated way possible. The enigma of what would happen next terrified me. When William woke up the next morning, I did what any reasonable person would do. I faked alcoholic amnesia. Oscar-worthy performance, really. Lots of confused blinking, hand to forehead, the whole "what happened last night" routine. I even asked Charlotte's maid, Margaret, if anything strange had happened, playing the innocent fool perfectly. But William? He remembered everything. I could see it in his eyes when he showed up at the tea house, where I was desperately trying to act normal. Every single detail was etched in his mind like a revelation he couldn't escape. The way I'd looked at him, the words I'd whispered, the touch that had shattered his carefully built walls, You can't fake forget something when the other person holds every piece of evidence. William cornered me in the garden behind the pavilion, away from prying eyes and gossiping courtiers. His voice was quiet, dangerous, vulnerable when he spoke. You saw me. Not the mask, not the Duke. You saw me crying, and you still stayed. The way he said it, like he was accusing me and thanking me at the same time, made my blood run cold and my heart race. And right there, I understood the depth of the mess I'd made. This wasn't just about changing a story anymore. This was about accidentally becoming someone's safe space, someone's forbidden truth in a world where showing weakness could get you killed. The disappearance of his walls happened because of me, and I had no idea how to handle that responsibility. Behind us, I could hear Lady Elizabeth Montgomery's laughter with the other nobles, the woman he was supposed to love. It's like when you confess something to someone at 3 a.m. and the next day you want to disappear off the face of the earth. Only here, there was no unsend button, no blocking, no pretending it didn't happen, no moving to another city to escape the awkwardness. I was stuck in a historical drama where my drunk mistake had turned into Duke William Blackwood's emotional awakening. The silence between us was louder than any words. Every glance carried weight. Every accidental touch reminded us both of that night. Even when we were in the same room with dozens of other nobles, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. And the worst part? A tiny, rebellious part of me didn't regret it at all, even though I knew I should. Especially when I caught him staring at me during the poetry gathering, his expression unreadable, but intense. The lost feeling consumed me, because I wasn't just lost in this world. I was lost in the implications of what I'd done. In the original story, William's character development comes from loneliness, from learning to trust again through carefully constructed plot points with Elizabeth as his guide. But I'd accidentally given him a shortcut, raw, unfiltered human connection at his lowest moment. It's like skipping to the final boss without leveling up first. You're unprepared, under-equipped, and probably going to die. Except in this case, dying meant destroying an entire storyline, and possibly dooming everyone involved. I watched Elizabeth smile sweetly at William across the banquet hall, completely unaware that I'd already broken something that was supposed to be hers. The puzzle of how to fix this consumed my every thought, but here's what terrified me most. The secret I couldn't even admit to myself at first. That moment with William, drunk, vulnerable, completely unfiltered. It had felt more real than anything in my actual life. For 28 years, I'd been a supporting character in my own story, always careful, always appropriate, always thinking 3 steps ahead about consequences. And in one reckless night, I'd finally been the main character of something, even if it was the wrong something. The codes I'd lived by had shattered, and I didn't know if I wanted to pick up the pieces or leave them broken. When William sent a private letter to Charlotte's residence the next day, sealed with his personal insignia and addressed only to me, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Something was approaching whether I was ready or not, and Elizabeth's destiny was slipping further away with each passing moment. I had a mission, a clear objective that should have been simple. Make Duke William Blackwood fall in love with the right person. Not me, not Charlotte Ashford, but Lady Elizabeth Montgomery, the original protagonist, the woman with whom he was supposed to end up. In my mind, it was damage control, fixing the mess I'd created that drunken night. I became a matchmaker obsessed with rewriting what I'd accidentally erased. The secret plan consumed my days and nights. I organized chance encounters, created situations where they'd be alone together, practically wrote fan fiction in real life. It was like trying to force 2 puzzle pieces together that clearly didn't want to fit anymore. Elizabeth was perfect, truly. She had everything the story promised: grace, intelligence, compassion that seemed to flow naturally from her. She'd donate to orphanages, speak eloquently about reform, and had this way of making everyone feel seen. On paper, she was William's ideal match. So I arranged a coincidental meeting at the Royal Library, knowing he went there every Thursday. I convinced Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting, Anne, to suggest the library as the perfect quiet place for reading. The codes of social etiquette made it easy to orchestrate. But when they met, William was polite, cordial even. But there was no spark, no mystery in his eyes, no curiosity. He looked at her the way you look at a pleasant painting. Nice, but forgettable. I didn't give up, though. Next, I fabricated a crisis at the charity house Elizabeth patronized, making sure William would be the one to help solve it. It was an elaborate conspiracy of good intentions. I thought maybe seeing her in action, watching her care for others, would trigger something in him. And it did trigger something. Respect, admiration even. But not love. Not that hungry, desperate need I'd accidentally awakened in him. The trace of our kiss haunted every interaction he had with her. I could see it in the way his eyes would drift, searching the room, and I knew he was looking for me. The conflict between what should be and what was becoming unbearable. The truth I didn't want to face? Every time I pushed him toward Elizabeth, he'd find a way back to me. It was like some cosmic joke, a riddle I couldn't solve. I'd set up a garden party where they were supposed to dance together, and somehow William would end up asking Charlotte to dance instead. I'd arrange for them to ride together during the hunt, and he'd make excuses to ride alongside my carriage. It was maddening because I was trying so hard to disappear, to become invisible again, to let the story flow as it should. But the more I tried to erase myself, the more visible I became to him. The hidden truth was screaming at me, but I refused to listen. Here's what really messed with my head. A part of me didn't want it to work. There, I said it. A tiny, selfish, completely inappropriate part of me was relieved every time my matchmaking failed. Because, for the first time in my entire existence, someone had chosen me first. Not as the backup plan, not as the safe option, not as the friend who'd listen to them talk about someone else. William looked at me like I was the only woman in the room, even when Elizabeth was right there being absolutely perfect. In my real life, I'd always been the reliable one. The girl guys would confide in about their crushes, never the crush itself. But to William, I was inevitable, and that feeling was intoxicating. I remember one particular afternoon at the Duke's estate. I'd orchestrated yet another accidental meeting between William and Elizabeth in his private gallery. The plan was perfect. She'd admire the art. He'd be impressed by her knowledge. They'd bond over shared interests. But William barely glanced at the painting she was commenting on. Instead, he kept watching me, standing awkwardly by the door, pretending to be invisible. When Elizabeth stepped away to examine a sculpture, he walked straight to me, ignored every rule of propriety, and whispered, "Stop trying to give me away to someone I don't want." The revelation in his words hit me like a physical blow. The silence that followed was deafening. The conflict tearing me apart wasn't just about the story anymore. It was about identity, about worth, about finally being seen and being absolutely terrified of it. Elizabeth represented everything safe, everything that made sense, everything that followed the rules I'd lived by my whole life. But William's attention, his choice, represented something forbidden and thrilling. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be someone's first choice. Not because I'd manipulated circumstances, not because I'd been convenient, but because of who I actually was. even if that person happened to be fictional. Even if choosing him meant destroying everything I knew about how stories were supposed to end. The puzzle of what I truly wanted was becoming impossible to ignore. So there I was, caught in a web I'd woven myself, pushing him away while secretly hoping he'd resist, playing matchmaker while silently celebrating every failure, pretending I wanted him to forget me while wearing the perfume he'd once mentioned he liked. It's that horrible space between what you think you should want and what your heart actually craves. Like staying in a job you hate because it looks good on paper, while your dream sits there, vanishing day by day because you're too scared to reach for it. And the worst part? William knew. He saw right through my elaborate schemes, my careful plans, my desperate attempts to rewrite our story. He knew I was running from something much bigger than him. I was running from the terrifying possibility of actually being happy. And that realization was about to change everything between us. 3 months. That's how long I managed to avoid being alone with Duke William Blackwood. 3 months of elaborate excuses, strategic illnesses, and perfectly timed trips to visit distant relatives that Charlotte Ashford apparently had scattered across the kingdom. I'd become a master of disappearing acts, always surrounded by people, never giving him a chance to corner me, to ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. The secret I was keeping wasn't just from him, it was from myself. I'd almost convinced myself that if enough time passed, that night would fade into insignificance, become just another amusing anecdote in the grand story. But some things don't fade. Some things hunt you down. He showed up at Charlotte's estate on a Tuesday morning, unannounced, without the usual courtesy of sending word ahead. My maid Margaret rushed into my chambers, her face pale, stuttering that the Duke himself was downstairs, refusing to leave until he spoke with me. No pleasantries, no social games, no pretending this was a casual visit. I could hear the conflict in Margaret's voice, torn between proper protocol and the sheer audacity of turning away a duke. When I finally descended those stairs, William was standing in the foyer like he owned the place, his expression carved from stone. The trace of gentleness I'd seen that drunken night was gone, replaced by something harder, more demanding. He wasn't asking anymore. He was done waiting. His first words cut through every defense I'd built. You owe me an explanation and a choice. Not, how have you been, or lovely weather we're having. Just straight to the point, like ripping off a bandage. The riddle was that he said it quietly, without anger, which somehow made it worse. Anger I could have handled, could have deflected. But this calm certainty, it was terrifying. He'd given me 3 months to come to him, to explain why I'd kissed him, and then spent every day since pretending he didn't exist. 3 months of watching me orchestrate his life like I had any right to. And his patience had run out. The codes of social propriety meant nothing to him in that moment. He wanted truth, and he wanted it now. What William wanted was simple and impossible at the same time. He wanted me to stay, forever, to stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending that night meant nothing. He wanted me to choose this world, choose him, above everything else, including my real life that was supposedly waiting for me somewhere in another dimension. It's like someone asking you to burn down your entire existence and rebuild from scratch, with the only guarantee being love. And who's crazy enough to do that? Who throws away certainty for a feeling? But as he spoke, laying out his case like a lawyer presenting evidence, I realized he'd thought about this constantly. Every moment I'd been avoiding him, he'd been planning this confrontation, this revelation. The worst part? He wasn't just demanding I stay. He was demanding I admit what I'd been denying for 3 months. that the kiss meant something. That every time I'd arranged for him to meet Elizabeth, I'd been fighting myself. That when I caught him staring at me across crowded rooms, my heart raced the same way his did. William had this uncanny ability to see through all my carefully constructed lies, to find the hidden truth I'd buried under layers of logic and self-preservation. He stood there in Charlotte's foyer, tall and unwavering, and said, "You felt it too. Stop lying to both of us." And God help me, he was right. The silence between us hummed with everything unsaid. I tried every argument I'd rehearsed in my mind during those 3 months. I told him about Elizabeth, about how perfect she was for him, about the story that was supposed to unfold. I explained that I was temporary, that I didn't belong in this world, that building something with me was like building on sand, destined to collapse. But William didn't flinch. He'd anticipated every excuse. "I don't want perfect," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that made my stomach flip. "I want real." And that night, drunk and honest and completely yourself, that was the most real thing I've ever experienced. It was a conspiracy of fate, really. The one person who could see me, truly see me, had to be someone from a fictional world. The puzzle was whether I had the courage to embrace it, because here's what haunted me most. I couldn't forget that kiss, no matter how hard I tried. It was like trying not to think about a pink elephant. The more you push it away, the more vivid it becomes. Every night, I'd lie in Charlotte's ornate bed and remember the taste of wine on his lips, the scent of sandalwood and rain that clung to him, the way his hands had cradled my face like I was made of crystal, and simultaneously like I was the only solid thing in his world. The way he'd kissed me back, surprised at first, then desperate, then reverent. That kiss had written something on my soul that I couldn't erase, no matter how many times I told myself it was a mistake. The disappearance of my certainty about everything had started with that kiss. William took a step closer, breaking every rule of propriety. And I didn't move away. Couldn't move away. "You think I haven't tried to forget?" he asked, and there was pain in his voice now, raw and exposed. "You think I wanted to become someone who looks for you in every room, who can't focus on conversations because I'm wondering what you're thinking. I've spent 3 months trying to be logical, trying to pursue the right match, trying to be the Duke everyone expects. But you ruined me for that, Charlotte." The way he said my name, Charlotte, even though he somehow knew it wasn't really mine, sent shivers through me. He knew I was an imposter in this body, and he didn't care. He'd fallen for the person wearing the mask, not the mask itself. And that terrified me more than anything else, because now I had to decide whether I was brave enough to let someone love the real me. The lost feeling was fading, replaced by something far more dangerous: hope. And with hope came the inevitable question I'd been avoiding. What if choosing him wasn't the wrong choice at all? Have you ever had to choose between 2 versions of yourself? Not just a simple decision, but a fundamental split where each path leads to a completely different person? In my real world, I was invisible but free. I could walk down the street without anyone caring, make mistakes without them becoming scandals, live a mediocre life without disappointing an entire duchy. But in William's world, I was seen, truly seen, but trapped in expectations, societal codes, and a story that wasn't supposed to be mine. It's like being forced to choose between breathing with your left lung or your right. You need both to actually live, but somehow you're expected to pick one and survive. The weight of that choice crushed me in ways I didn't expect. Every morning I'd wake up in Charlotte's bed, and for a split second, I'd forget which world I was in. That moment of confusion became its own kind of torture, a riddle my mind couldn't solve. In my real life, I had my mom's Sunday dinners, my best friend Sophie, who knew all my secrets, my tiny apartment where I could be completely myself. Sure, I was lonely sometimes, and yeah, my life wasn't exactly exciting, but it was mine. I'd built it, chosen it, knew every corner of it. But here I was playing a role, inhabiting someone else's skin, living in a world where one wrong move could mean social ruin or worse. The conflict wasn't just external. It was ripping me apart from the inside. But then there was William, and every logical argument I made crumbled when he looked at me like I hung the moon. In my real world, I'd gone on dates with guys who checked their phones during dinner, who talked about themselves for hours, who saw me as pleasant enough, but never essential. I was always the nice girl, the one they'd date while waiting for someone more exciting to come along. The secret pain of being someone's temporary stop rather than their destination, I'd learned to live with that. But William, he'd turned down marriage proposals from women far more beautiful and connected than Charlotte. He'd risked his reputation by showing up at my estate unannounced. He'd put his heart on display in a world where vulnerability could destroy you. How do you walk away from the first person who ever made you feel irreplaceable? Here's the brutal truth nobody talks about. Both choices meant loss. Staying meant never seeing my family again, never attending my nephew's graduation, never sitting in my favorite coffee shop, watching rain streak down the windows. It meant accepting that everyone I loved would think I'd vanished, maybe died, and I'd never be able to tell them I was okay. The disappearance would be complete and permanent. But leaving meant abandoning something real, something that had awakened parts of me I didn't know existed. It meant going back to a life where I'd always wonder, what if? The mystery of which loss I could actually survive kept me awake at night, staring at Charlotte's ceiling, counting the same cracks over and over. The fear existed on both sides, perfectly balanced like some cosmic joke. Stay, and I'd be trapped in a gilded cage, forever playing a role, never able to fully be myself because I'd always be an imposter in Charlotte's life. William might love me now, but what happens when the novelty wears off? When he realizes I don't actually know the history of this world, the intricate politics, the unspoken rules everyone else absorbed since childhood, the hidden truth was that I'd always be faking it. One wrong move away from exposure. And in a world where reputation meant everything, that kind of revelation could destroy us both. The thought of disappointing him, of watching love turn to regret in his eyes, was its own special kind of hell. But returning to my real world carried its own terror. How do you go back to being invisible after someone's made you feel like the sun? How do you accept good enough after experiencing can't breathe without you? It's like living in black and white your whole life, suddenly experiencing color, and then being asked to go back and pretend you don't remember what red looks like. I'd lie awake imagining my return, sitting at my desk job, filing reports, eating lunch alone while scrolling through my phone, coming home to an empty apartment, going on mediocre dates with men who'd never look at me the way William did. The silence of that existence, after experiencing the intensity of being truly wanted, felt like a different kind of death. A slower, quieter one. But death, nonetheless. I confided in Margaret one evening, as much as I dared without revealing the whole truth. I told her I was considering a marriage proposal that would mean leaving everything I knew behind. She looked at me with those wise eyes of hers and said something that haunted me. "Miss Charlotte, I've watched noble ladies choose security over passion their whole lives. They live comfortably, respectably, and die wondering what might have been. The ones who choose passion, they live fully, even if it's harder. It was like having someone put words to the conspiracy I'd been sensing all along, that society wants us to choose the safe path, to distrust our hearts, to believe that comfort is the same as happiness. The codes we live by are designed to keep us small, predictable, controllable. But what if breaking them was the only way to actually live? The lost feeling reached its peak when I realized I wasn't actually choosing between two worlds. I was choosing between two versions of fear. Fear of losing what I knew versus fear of losing what I'd found. Fear of being trapped versus fear of being ordinary. Fear of exposure versus fear of obscurity. And maybe that's what choosing always is. Not picking the option without fear, but picking which fear you're willing to face. William represented the fear of jumping without a net, of trusting something intangible, of believing I deserved something extraordinary. My real world represented the fear of settling, of playing it safe, of reaching the end of my life, and realizing I'd never actually lived. Both terrified me. But as I stood at this crossroads, a new question emerged, one I couldn't ignore anymore. Which fear would I regret more? And that question, that puzzle with no easy answer, was about to force me to confront something even deeper. The real reason I was so scared to choose. The real truth? I wasn't trying to forget the kiss. I was trying to forget how I felt during it, powerful, desired, alive, and that terrified me more than any choice between worlds ever could. Because accepting that feeling meant accepting something I'd spent 28 years denying, that maybe I deserved to feel that way. Maybe I wasn't meant to be the background character, the safe choice, the woman people settled for when their first option didn't work out. The secret I'd been keeping wasn't about William or Charlotte or this fictional world. It was about me, the real me, and the fact that I'd been living half a life because I was too scared to want more. It's like being someone who's lived with chronic pain for so long that when the pain finally disappears, you don't recognize the feeling of being okay. You almost miss the pain because at least it was familiar. I'd been so comfortable in my role as the overlooked one that being seen, really, truly seen, felt wrong somehow. Like I was wearing someone else's clothes that fit too well. That night with William, drunk and unfiltered, I hadn't been performing. I hadn't been trying to be likable or appropriate or whatever version of myself I thought people wanted. I'd just been me, raw, messy, emotional, real. And he'd responded to that, not some carefully curated version. The puzzle was that authenticity was what drew him in, and I'd spent months trying to bury it again. William caught me in the library one rainy afternoon, a few days after his confrontation at my estate. I'd been hiding there, thinking it was the last place he'd look. But he knew me better than I wanted to admit. He sat down across from me, not touching, just watching. And then he said something that shattered every defense I had left. "You're not running from me, Charlotte. You're running from yourself. You're terrified of being happy because you don't think you deserve it." The revelation in those words hit like a physical blow. How did he see that? How did this fictional character understand me better than people I'd known my entire real life? The silence stretched between us as I tried to find a denial that wouldn't be an obvious lie. The worst part was that he was absolutely right. I'd been performing my whole life. The dutiful daughter who chose the practical major. The reliable friend who never caused drama. The employee who stayed late without complaining. The woman who dated men her parents would approve of even when they bored her to tears. I'd collected all these good girl badges, built this entire identity around being low maintenance and easy to love, hoping that if I was just agreeable enough, someone would finally choose me. But here's the conflict. You can't be chosen if you're not actually present. I'd been so busy being what everyone else needed that I'd disappeared. The vanishing of my true self had been so gradual, I hadn't even noticed until William held up a mirror and forced me to look. In my real life, I'd mastered the art of shrinking. At work meetings, I'd have brilliant ideas but let others present them because I didn't want to seem pushy. On dates, I'd agree with opinions I didn't share because disagreement felt risky. With friends, I'd laugh at jokes that weren't funny and pretend to like activities I hated because being agreeable felt safer than being authentic. It's that horrible space where you're so afraid of rejection that you reject yourself first, preemptively. You remove all the parts someone might not like until there's nothing left but a pleasant, forgettable surface. And then you wonder why nobody sees you, why love always feels like settling, why you're perpetually lonely, even when surrounded by people. The hidden truth was that I'd been burying myself alive, one compromise at a time. But that night with William, something had short-circuited in my brain. Maybe it was the wine, or the shock of being in a fictional world, or the raw vulnerability of seeing him cry. Whatever it was, all my usual filters had disappeared. When he'd looked at me with those devastated eyes, I hadn't calculated the appropriate response. I hadn't wondered what Charlotte would do or what would keep me safe. I'd just acted from pure instinct, comfort, connection, desire, and for those few minutes, I'd been more myself than in years of my real life. That kiss wasn't about him, not really. It was about me, finally breaking free from the prison I'd built. And now he was asking me to stay in that freedom. And I wanted to run, because freedom is terrifying when you've only known cages. William leaned forward in his library chair, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that made my heart race. Do you know what I fell for that night? It wasn't Charlotte Ashford, the proper lady who knows all the right things to say. It was the woman who cried with me, who didn't try to fix anything, who just stayed. The woman who kissed me like she'd been wanting to for years, but had never given herself permission. That woman, wherever she came from, whoever she really is, that's who I want. The codes I'd lived by were crumbling, and with them, every excuse I'd used to keep myself small. He saw the conspiracy I'd been running, pretending to be less than I was to make others comfortable. And he was calling me out on it, challenging me to show up fully, to take up space, to believe I was worth pursuing. Here's what I finally understood. Sitting in that library with rain drumming against the windows and William's eyes boring into mine, I hadn't been afraid of choosing him. I'd been afraid of choosing me. Afraid of admitting I wanted passion instead of safety, adventure instead of predictability, being cherished instead of being tolerated. Because wanting those things meant acknowledging I deserved them, and I'd spent my whole life collecting evidence that I didn't. Every guy who'd chosen someone else, every job promotion that went to someone more assertive, every time I'd been overlooked, I'd turned it into proof that wanting more was foolish. But what if I'd been wrong? What if the only thing standing between me and the life I actually wanted was my own refusal to reach for it? The mystery wasn't whether William was worth it. It was whether I believed I was. And that question, that fundamental question of self-worth, was about to change everything. Because I couldn't choose a world until I chose to stop abandoning myself. And that revelation was both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The lost feeling was transforming into something else, a compass pointing toward a version of myself I'd never had the courage to become, until now. Choosing isn't romantic like it is in books. Let me be brutally honest with you, It's terrifying. It's painful. It's full of doubts that creep in at 3 a.m. and make you question everything. The secret nobody tells you is that making a real choice, one that fundamentally changes your life, feels less like courage and more like stepping off a cliff blindfolded, hoping there's something to catch you, but having absolutely no guarantee. It's like skydiving. You know the theory. You've trained mentally 1,000 times. You understand the mechanics. But when you're standing at that open plane door with wind screaming in your face, everything in your body screams to step back. Your hands shake, your legs feel like water, and every survival instinct you have is begging you to choose the familiar safety of the plane over the unknown terror of the fall. I made a decision. I went back to my real world. I know what you're thinking. After everything, after William's confession, after realizing I'd been running from myself, I still left. But here's the conflict. I needed to see it one last time. Needed to stand in my actual apartment, see my actual life, and make the choice consciously rather than running away from one world into another. Because choosing something means you also choose to let go of something else, and I needed to grieve that loss properly. The trace of my old life deserved that respect. So I found a way back through the same mysterious portal that had brought me to Charlotte's world, and I spent 3 days in the life I thought I'd been fighting to return to. And those 3 days? They were the emptiest of my entire existence. Not because my world was bad or my life was terrible. It wasn't. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. My apartment still smelled like vanilla candles. My coffee maker still made that weird grinding sound. My succulent was somehow still alive on the windowsill. I met Sophie for brunch, and she talked about her new boyfriend while I nodded and smiled. I went to my office, sat at my desk, answered emails that felt monumentally pointless. I watched Netflix alone on my couch, scrolled through social media, ordered takeout. Normal life. The life millions of people live. Safe, predictable, comfortable, and I felt absolutely nothing. The silence inside me was deafening. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the hollow emptiness of realizing you've outgrown something you can never fit back into. It wasn't that the world was different. I was different. That's the puzzle of transformation. You can return to the same physical space, but you can't return to who you were before. It's like wearing clothes from when you were 15. Technically, they might still fit, but they're not you anymore. I'd caught a glimpse of what living fully felt like, what being chosen felt like, what showing up authentically felt like, and I couldn't unsee it. Sitting in my apartment on the second night, eating Thai food straight from the container, I had this moment of brutal clarity. This wasn't home anymore. Maybe it never really had been. Maybe I'd just been existing here, going through motions, waiting for my real life to start. The revelation was both liberating and devastating. On the third morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. in my old bed, and the first thought I had wasn't about my schedule, or what to wear, or what needed to get done. It was about William. Wondering if he was okay, if he thought I'd abandoned him, if he was back to being that closed-off Duke who couldn't trust anyone. And then I thought about Charlotte's estate, about Margaret bringing morning tea, about the way sunlight streamed through those ancient windows, about the library where I'd spent hours getting lost in books I couldn't find in my world. I thought about the version of myself that existed there, bolder, messier, more alive. And I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't homesick for my apartment, or my routine, or even my loved ones in the way I thought I'd be. I was homesick for myself, for the woman I'd started becoming in that other world. The hidden truth was that I'd found myself by getting lost, and returning home had made me feel more lost than ever. But here's where it gets complicated. where the codes of what we're supposed to want clash with what we actually need. I had people here who loved me. My mom, Sophie, my brother. They weren't dramatic declarations of passion, but they were real, steady, dependable. Could I really just vanish from their lives? The conspiracy of obligation, guilt, and genuine love created a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I called my mom that afternoon just to hear her voice, and she complained about my aunt's new haircut and asked when I was coming for dinner and told me she loved me. And I almost broke. Because choosing to leave meant hurting people who'd never done anything but care about me. It meant becoming a mystery, an unsolved disappearance, a name on missing person reports. How do you choose your own happiness when it means causing others pain? I spent that last evening writing letters I'd never be able to send. One to my mom, explaining that I wasn't in danger, that I'd found something I couldn't walk away from, begging her to forgive me for the pain my absence would cause. One to Sophie, thanking her for years of friendship and apologizing for leaving without a real goodbye. One to my brother, telling him to take care of our parents and to remember me as happy, not missing. The conflict of writing words no one would ever read was its own special torture. I knew they'd search for me, worry about me, possibly never find closure. That guilt was a weight I'd carry forever. But here's what I finally understood. Martyring yourself, living a half-life to spare others discomfort, isn't actually love. It's just fear wearing a noble costume. Real love, including self-love, sometimes means making choices that others won't understand. As I sat in my apartment for the last time, surrounded by the life I'd built over 28 years, I made peace with an uncomfortable truth. Choosing to live authentically isn't pretty. It doesn't come with neat resolutions or everyone's blessing. Sometimes it means becoming the person others worry about, talk about, can't understand. Sometimes it means disappointing people, breaking hearts, walking away from good things to pursue great things. The enigma of whether I was making the right choice wouldn't be solved tonight, or next month, or maybe ever. But I'd learned something crucial in those 3 empty days. Regretting a bold choice was better than regretting no choice at all. I'd rather live with the consequences of choosing myself than die having never tried. So I took one last look around my apartment, touched the walls that had contained my small, safe life, and I walked back toward that portal, not running away this time, walking toward William, toward passion, toward the terrifying freedom of being fully myself, toward a life that might be harder but would definitely be mine. And as I felt reality shift around me, pulling me back into Charlotte's world, I felt something I hadn't felt in my real world for 3 days. I felt alive. The question wasn't whether this was the right choice anymore. It was what I'd do with the courage it took to make it. That kiss wasn't just a kiss. Let me say that again because it's important. That drunken, impulsive, completely inappropriate kiss in Duke William Blackwood's chambers wasn't just a physical act. It was a portal, a declaration, a before and after stamped permanently into my existence. It was like biting into a fruit you didn't know existed, and suddenly realizing every other taste you'd experienced before was just a shadow of flavor. Some moments are so transformative that they split your life into 2 distinct timelines: who you were before and who you became after. That kiss was my timeline splitter, my point of no return, the secret catalyst that unraveled every carefully constructed lie I'd been telling myself about who I was and what I deserved. When I returned to Charlotte's world, stepping back through that shimmering portal in the abandoned chapel, William was waiting. He'd somehow known I'd come back to that exact spot, at that exact time. He was leaning against the stone wall, arms crossed, trying to look casual, but failing miserably because his eyes were red-rimmed and his usual perfect composure was shattered. When he saw me, he didn't run over or sweep me into his arms like some romance novel hero. He just stared, like he couldn't quite believe I was real, like I might disappear again if he blinked. The silence between us held 3 days of his agony. 3 days of wondering if I'd chosen my other world. 3 days of thinking that kiss had meant everything to him, but nothing to me. The conflict in his expression, relief, anger, hope, fear, made my heart crack. "You came back," he said, and his voice broke on the last word. Not a question, just a statement of disbelief. I walked toward him slowly, and he pushed off the wall, meeting me halfway. We stood there in that dusty chapel, neither of us touching, both of us afraid that the moment was too fragile for contact. I needed to see it, I told him. My old life needed to stand in it one more time and make sure I was choosing you, not just running away from something. His jaw clenched, and I could see him processing that, understanding it even though it had hurt him. The puzzle was that leaving had been necessary for truly returning. Sometimes you have to walk away to understand what's worth coming back to. That's when William did something that broke me completely. He took my face in his hands, the same way he'd done when I'd kissed him that first night, and he said, "That kiss changed me. I need you to understand that. I wasn't just some lonely duke who got caught up in a moment. You showed me what it felt like to be seen, and I can't go back to being invisible to myself." The revelation in his words mirrored my own journey. We'd both been living as ghosts in our own lives, and that drunken kiss had somehow made us both real. It was a conspiracy of fate, of timing, of two people who needed exactly what the other could give, meeting in the most impossible circumstances. The codes of logic said this shouldn't work, but logic had nothing to do with what we were building. Then he kissed me. But this time, we were both sober, both choosing it consciously, both fully present. And oh God, it was nothing like that first kiss, and everything like it at the same time. It was familiar, the taste of him, the way his fingers tangled in my hair, the sound he made in the back of his throat when I pressed closer. But it was also brand new because, this time, I wasn't running from myself. I was running toward something, toward him, toward us, toward the terrifying and exhilarating possibility of living out loud. This kiss was a promise, a commitment, an acknowledgement that we were both jumping off that cliff together with no safety net. The hidden truth we'd both been hiding was now out in the open. This was real. This was chosen. This was ours. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, William rested his forehead against mine and laughed. Actually laughed. "I've been rehearsing what I'd say if you came back," he admitted. "Had this whole speech about duty and honor, and making me understand why you had to leave. But the second I saw you, all of that disappeared. All I could think was, she's here. She's real. She chose me." The vulnerability in his confession made my eyes burn with tears, because that's what that kiss had given us both. Permission to be vulnerable, to want things, to take up space in each other's lives without apology. It was like waking up from a dream of decades and realizing you'd been sleepwalking through your real life, going through motions, but never actually feeling anything deeply. And some things, once you taste them, once you know what they feel like, you can't pretend anymore that you're satisfied with less. I thought about all the kisses I'd had in my real life. The awkward first kiss in high school, the mediocre ones with boyfriends who were fine but not right, the empty ones where I'd felt more alone after than before. None of them had changed anything fundamental about me. They'd been pleasant or disappointing or forgettable, but they hadn't rewired my understanding of myself. This kiss with William, both the first drunken one and this conscious, chosen one, had exposed a truth I'd been avoiding my whole life. I'd been settling for crumbs when I could have had the whole feast. I'd been so afraid of wanting too much, of being too much, that I'd accepted whatever scraps of affection came my way and called it enough. The disappearance of my self-worth had been so gradual, I'd normalized it. But that kiss had been like turning on lights in a dark room. Suddenly, I could see all the ways I'd been diminishing myself. William pulled me closer, and I let myself melt into him, feeling the solid reality of his chest against my cheek, his heartbeat matching mine. "We're going to face consequences," I told him quietly, because fairy tales aside, choosing him meant entering a world of social politics, expectations, and people who'd question Charlotte's sudden importance to the Duke. There will be conspiracies about us, scandals, people trying to tear us apart because I'm not supposed to be the heroine of this story. He tightened his arms around me and pressed a kiss to my hair. "Let them try," he murmured. That first kiss taught me something crucial. I'd rather have one real moment with you than a lifetime of appropriate moments with someone else. I spent years being the perfect Duke, making the right choices, following every code society demanded, and I was miserable. You changed that. That kiss changed that. And standing there, in that abandoned chapel, holding each other like we were each other's anchor in a storm, I finally understood what people meant when they talked about transformative love. It wasn't just about finding someone. It was about finding yourself through someone's eyes and liking what you saw. That kiss hadn't just changed everything between us. It had changed everything about how I saw myself, and that change was irreversible. The mystery of whether this would work, whether choosing passion over safety was wise, whether love could survive in impossible circumstances, none of that mattered as much as the simple, powerful truth that I was finally choosing to live. And it all started with a kiss I couldn't take back. Wouldn't take back, even if I could. Because some things, once tasted, become essential. And William Blackwood, this impossible man in this impossible world, had become as essential to me as breathing. So here we are, at the end of this story. But really, it's just the beginning of yours. Because everything I just shared with you wasn't just about me and William and some fictional world where dukes exist and kisses rewrite destinies. It was about you. About that secret you've been keeping from yourself. That dream you buried because it seemed impractical. That version of yourself you've been too afraid to become. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest. How much longer are you going to wait? How many more years will you spend playing it safe, being appropriate, choosing the comfortable prison over the terrifying freedom? Because time doesn't pause while you gather courage. Life is happening right now. And every day you choose safety over truth is a day you can never get back. What would happen if you stopped running from yourself? Not tomorrow. Not when circumstances are perfect. Not when you feel ready. Because here's the revelation nobody wants to hear. You'll never feel ready. Courage doesn't arrive as a feeling. It arrives as a decision. What if you took that job that terrifies you? What if you had that conversation you've been avoiding? What if you stopped settling for people who treat you like an option and started demanding to be someone's priority? What if you kissed your own version of Duke William Blackwood, metaphorically or literally, and stopped apologizing for wanting something real, something passionate, something that makes you feel alive? The conflict you're experiencing right now, that discomfort, that restlessness, that's not a problem to solve. That's your soul begging you to wake up. Here's what I need you to understand, and this is crucial. Every single reason you have for not choosing yourself is just fear wearing a logical costume. It's not the right time, fear. I have responsibilities, fear. What will people think, fear. I might fail, fear. I might succeed and not know how to handle it. Also, fear. The codes we live by, the rules we follow, the expectations we meet, they're all designed to keep us small, predictable, controllable. But you weren't put on this earth to be small. You were put here to live fully, to want deeply, to risk greatly. And yes, choosing yourself might mean disappointing people. It might mean facing consequences. It might mean walking into the unknown without a map. But the alternative, reaching the end of your life having never tried, that's not safety. That's tragedy. I want you to think about something right now. Close your eyes if you need to. What's the one thing you'd do if you knew you couldn't fail? What's the desire you've been suppressing because it seems impossible or inappropriate or too much? That thing right there, that's not random. That's not frivolous. That's your truth trying to break through the silence you've forced it into. And every day you ignore it, it gets quieter, until one day you can't hear it anymore. Until you become one of those people who says, I used to want things, instead of I'm going after what I want. Don't let that happen. Don't let the world convince you that your authentic desires are somehow less valid than everyone else's expectations. The mystery isn't whether you can do it. It's whether you'll give yourself permission to try. So what are you going to do? Are you going to close this video, nod along, think, that was nice, and then go right back to the same patterns that have been keeping you stuck? Or are you going to do something different? I'm not asking you to quit your job tomorrow or move to another country. Though, if that's your truth, maybe you should. I'm asking you to make one choice today that honors who you actually are instead of who you think you should be. Send that text. Apply for that opportunity. Have that difficult conversation. Stop accepting crumbs from people who should be giving you the whole feast. Choose yourself in one small, concrete way, and watch how that choice creates a ripple effect that transforms everything. The hidden power you have is immense, but only if you actually use it. And listen, I know this is scary. I know choosing yourself feels selfish when you've spent your whole life making everyone else comfortable. But here's what I learned from kissing a duke in a world I didn't belong to and choosing passion over safety. Self-betrayal is the worst kind of betrayal. Every time you silence your truth to keep peace, every time you shrink to make others comfortable, every time you choose what's expected over what's real, you're abandoning yourself. And that disappearance, that slow vanishing of your authentic self, hurts more than any external consequence ever could. You deserve to be chosen. By others, yes, but more importantly, by yourself. You deserve to feel what it's like to be fully alive, even if it's messy and complicated and doesn't fit into neat categories. Stop waiting for permission. Give it to yourself. Here's my challenge to you, and I'm serious about this. Within the next 24 hours, make one decision that your old self wouldn't have made. Something that scares you a little, that feels slightly too bold, that makes you think, can I really do this? Because that discomfort, that's growth, that's transformation. That's you breaking out of the cage you've been living in. Comment below and tell me what choice you're making. What's your forbidden kiss? What's your Duke William demanding that you finally choose yourself? I want to know, and more importantly, Declaring it publicly makes it real. It creates accountability. It turns intention into action. And who knows, your courage might inspire someone else to finally make their choice too. We're all connected in this conspiracy to actually start living instead of just existing. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that uncomfortable recognition of yourself in my journey, if you're ready to stop playing small and start living large, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Because this is just the beginning. I'm going to keep sharing stories about choosing authenticity over approval, passion over safety, truth over comfort. Stories about people who made the scary choice and discovered that the life they were afraid of was actually the life they were meant for. You don't have to stay stuck in the version of yourself that everyone expects. You can evolve, you can transform, you can choose differently, but only if you commit to showing up for these conversations, for this community of people who are done settling and ready to actually live. The puzzle of your life isn't what will happen if you choose yourself. It's what will happen if you don't. And trust me, I've seen both sides now. I've lived in the safe world where everything makes sense and nothing matters. And I've lived in the terrifying world where nothing makes sense, but everything matters. And I'm telling you, from the bottom of my transformed heart, choose the thing that scares you. Choose the passion. Choose yourself. Because some kisses change everything, some choices rewrite your entire story, and some moments, like this one right now, are invitations to finally start living the life you were always meant to live. The question is, will you accept the invitation? Hit subscribe, activate those notifications, and let's continue this journey together. Your extraordinary life is waiting. Stop making it wait any longer.